Can you hear me okay?
Trying to
Can
find
you hear me okay?
Yeah, but
I hear you.
we're gonna probably have you mute. We might take questions at the end, I think. So I'm just gonna make sure everyone's muted. Okay. Let me see if we don't want her muted.
There we go. I feel like the way I look looks all strange.
Erik, did you ever suffer from mold rage?
I suppose I did. You know, when you're in the midst of it, because it shuts off your ability to perceive that that's your problem, you're probably going through it without becoming aware that it's affecting you that way. You know, you tend to rationalize it, like this isn't appropriate behavior, missing the signs that no, you're acting out a little bit more than you normally would do.
I remember when I started having an awareness that something was wrong with the way that I was lashing out, because when my husband and I first moved into our apartment, that the first one that started making us really sick, and we didn't know that there was hidden mold there, we would cook together in the kitchen, and years later that's where we would find the biggest source. So, and there was a smell there hiding, and we would fight like crazy, and I would be so mean. Do you remember that fight we got into over the chicken? We got into a legendary fight over how to cook chicken. Like, we literally still kind of like make fun of each other about it. It was just like the biggest blowout fight over how to cook chicken, and it's ridiculous. Like, we cooked before together all the time. Like, there's no reason to get into a fight about how to cook chicken. Like, nothing's that serious. And I remember like just lashing out at him in a way that I really never ever, like, I never had an anger issue before. And later that night thinking, like, what's wrong with me? Like, why did I talk to him like that? Like, why was I so angry about this chicken? It's so silly to say, like, we got into a fight over chicken, but I remember questioning myself of like, what's wrong with me? And then later when it advanced really seriously, where I was lashing out all the time, I didn't even have the context in my brain to wonder what was wrong, because I was too far in it at that point.
Well, later on, after watching somebody rage or exhibit this strange, you know, mind lock problem where they seem to be out of touch with, not slightly, you know, connected with reality, I'd ask them about it later, and they would deny that it had ever happened.
I know people who do that, who totally deny that they have any anger issues. Now, do you think that this is also a symptom of the nerve agent, like an inability to see it? Or do you think they're like, I mean, do you think that they're lying, or do you think that they're really not comprehending what's happening, or do you think they're minimizing it?
Well, that's just it. I'd ask people, you really don't remember? And these are people that I know that would have no reason to lie about it. And over time, I became convinced that this was truly shutting off the portion of their brain that was allowing them to perceive and, you know, make sense and remember the situation. So, yeah.
You said that nerve agents do that.
Yeah, in the military, that one of the classic signs of nerve agent exposure is that people will go into denial. At the faintest whiff of nerve agent, you know, it doesn't necessarily kill you right away. There can be an extremely low level, but one of the signs is pinpoint pupils, and people would go into a savage denial. And the military warned us, you've got to get their gas mask on. However, the first effect of nerve agent will be to shut off the portion of the brain necessary to recognize that they're in trouble. And it will cause a ballistic denial response, and they will fight you physically to prevent you from putting on their gas mask. And what's more, to convince you that nothing is wrong, they will try to rip your gas mask off.
And this is where your commander told you, if that happens, you have to knock them out with the butt of your rifle for your safety and theirs, and drag them out.
Yeah, we were taught that if somebody's showing these signs of ballistic denial, never approach them by yourself, because they'll, you know, come straight at you and rip your gas mask, and then you'll be in the same boat. They say you have to approach them in pairs, and try to get them down. And we were even supplied with duct tape and Ziploc ties to tie people's hands behind their back because, you know, even after you get their gas mask on, they would still be disabled and would try to take it off again.
So what do you think it is about mold that it's acting as a nerve agent that you were trained on in biological warfare? Why are some of the symptoms and the presentation the same in your opinion?
Well, the Stachybotrys, the trichothecene mycotoxins, are potent nerve agents. I mean, all the literature expresses that while other molds, you know, ochratoxin and gliotoxins, they act on the liver and the kidneys and cause various other problems. The trichothecenes in particular are nerve agents. They're neurotropic and they inhibit neural function.
So they
So when I
naturally,
saw this type of behavior in known Stachybotrys infested buildings and having this awareness that there is something special about this particular class of toxin, my military training allowed me to make this observation that people's brains are shut off in a very similar way.
so it's not a stretch to say that trichothecene mycotoxins have the cholinergic, did I say that right?
Yeah.
Cholinergic response because they're literally a nerve toxin. So that's what you would expect from a nerve agent.
Yeah, the proper function of synapses depends on a balance of the ability of the neural impulses to cross the gap, and cholinergic agents screw up that process, either facilitate it or disable it. And what nerve agent is, it's an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. So it causes the neural impulses to be so completely blocked across the synapses that your muscles will contract, you'll roll up into a ball, and you will cease to breathe because none of your muscles are functioning anymore.
So Renee said something very interesting here in a message. She said 90% of income of the Army's biological chemical warfare study is Stachybotrys chartarum. It is being used in every war. I'm living in it. Is there any way that you can explain further what you mean, Renee?
Can I unmute myself and speak?
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
I've only known by study, but I did have my home tested about a month and a half ago. And I've lived in, unfortunately, mycotoxins for a long time. I've been out of it and been well. I have a child here that's sick from it, unfortunately. But my uncle, who's the head of the Food and Drug Administration, was a very high-ranking military official since I think the 50s when they started. Can you give me a second, please? I love you. Since they started studying in Lyme, Connecticut, 90% of the biological, let's just say that 90% of the income, and you have to forgive me because I'm just getting over COVID, 90% of the income for our biological chemical warfare study has been the study of Stachybotrys chartarum, black mold. And it's been used in every single war.
Eric,
Well, I've
I'm
heard
just
about the yellow rain incident in Cambodia, and they've been debating on that for years and years without reaching any, compelling conclusion.
The
And
idea,
I can't really attest. I mean, I don't have that information that it's been used at any other time. I know the military would like to, because anytime there's a good toxin they can turn into a biological weapon, they're certainly interested in doing it.
well, Stachybotrys chartum, which is black. I mean, I know you know what it is, but there's no temperature that it can be killed at, whether it's extreme cold or extreme heat. And you can put extremely high numbers into such to a tiny little space. And it has been studied and used since Lyme, Connecticut. That's why all of Lyme, Connecticut, the research labs have been closed down. Like I said, I've been, excuse my voice, I've been living in it, and amongst 11 other mycotoxins, but the black mold, Stachybotrys chartum, is the hardest, but they have been using it, and I can back the studies.
Well, I have heard that trichothecene mycotoxins are stable up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit.
Absolutely, you're
So
correct.
it's a very, very durable and very powerful toxin. Now,
Absolutely.
it seems to me, because I've heard that there's a connection between these types of toxins and Lyme disease, and it seemed to me that the first thing that any mold researchers should do is try to contact the original survivors of the Lyme, Connecticut incident and ask if they have any mold stories. What do they know about it?
Well, if you go into the actual labs, which has all been closed down now, or the whole town of Lyme, Connecticut is now abandoned because of high mycotoxin levels, such
I
as
think you're referring to Plum Island.
yes. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the entire island is contaminated and is a biohazard, and they did many, many different things on Plum Island. As far as Lyme, Connecticut goes, as far as I know, it's still a very nice place, and it's still full of ticks. There's still a lot of Lyme disease there.
I live in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of Lyme here. They seem to like me a lot.
So, in the lack of good science, it just seemed logical to me that if there's any question about whether people with Lyme disease have a special reactivity to mold, the recourse would be to simply go there and ask them. They're still there.
I wish I had transportation. I'd be there. I can only tell you what it's like. I think you were touching base on I'm not sure the other young lady's name that was hosting this before, but she was talking about mold rage. I think this is
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
what
you for
bothers
bringing
me
that
about
full circle.
researchers is that when there's a clear path to resolution of something, they almost never take that path.
Hey,
Are you
Alicia,
there?
I'm wondering if you could share your experience a little bit, like as much or as little as you're comfortable with, because I thought that was so interesting. The time when, you and Eric and I have the longest group chat in the history of group chats. But the day that you sent us the message, like, mold rage is real. What was that like, figuring that out? And could you just share like what that was? Like, you get through this whole journey, and then at a certain point you're like, oh my gosh, this thing is happening. Would you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I feel like for a lot of us, once we know mold is the issue, we think about our lives and we look back to when we were younger and to see like, when was that moment when I just started to become extremely sick or unwell and just could never figure it out. And that's who I was as a child. I was always sick. And I would have these rageful moments. I mean, I would throw things at my parents. I would scream. I was always crazy. And I always thought, man, my life is pretty crazy. And maybe that's why I'm crazy. But no one acts like that normally. And, it wasn't until recently that I put the two and two together. And it was like another, it's like when you occupy spaces with your family, it's like whoever is closest to you gets the brunt of your rage. And, you know, that's been my husband, and him and I would fight with each other in our home in Oregon. I mean, and he would have these crazy breakdowns all the time and freak out, and we would fight for just the stupidest things. And, you know, Erik would talk about this, and Keely would always tell me about this. And I seen, you know, Keely post videos with her husband about how, you know, they would fight with each other. And so that's when I started to understand, like, this is an exposure-based reaction. Like, my body is freaking out, and, you know, just the slightest little irritant has put me over the edge. And it's not even just with the mold rage. It's anything. If it's a stressful moment, I'm like extremely freaking out, like even over little things that people can normally get over. My body just can't tolerate it and would just go overboard. And, you know, it's like that with the rage. And it's a crazy, crazy experience, because when you get out of it, you almost instantly regret it. And I think that's when the denial comes in, because you're like, that's not me. That's not who I am intrinsically, right? I'm not this crazy person. How could I possibly treat my loved one in this fashion, right? And so I would always have those moments of remorse and like, what did I just do? Like, this is insane, and what's happening? And so it's really interesting that, Erik, you found that study that you quoted earlier that we'll go ahead and share with our audience after this conversation, about how these toxins are literally acting like nerve agents, and that's why people are acting crazy. And it makes me think about all these stories that we see in the media. Husband kills wife and children, wife drowns children, you know, wife is hearing voices in the bathroom and, you know, does something to herself, and really makes you wonder, are these people crazy, or were they being poisoned in their homes? And because of that poisoning, they did these crazy things, right?
Yeah, that was a great paper by Tamara Tuominen. Fantastic, extremely detailed, talking about some of the evidence for these acetylcholinesterase inhibitors from mold to be having a cholinergic response, inhibiting the synapses. And this is the anticipated effect of what happens when synaptic function is disrupted. Now, I got sick in Hitler's bunker. Yes, I did. I really did. Hard to believe, but I was stationed in Germany in a bunker built for Adolf Hitler. The basement flooded, black mold grew, and a problem of immune dysfunction lit up in my army unit, such that we were actually the first nuclear-ready unit to be taken off active duty for sheer rate of illness. My commanding officer was furious. And along with that is we had fights, we had arguments, everybody was in a constant rage, acting crazy. And when people started to recover from these weird flus that we're going through, they started sending us out to the field, because if we spent more than about 2 weeks back in the garrison area inside this moldy bunker, people would start killing each other. And they would tell us, you've got to tone it down with the fights and the violence and the screaming and the yelling and all the problems, because if you don't, we're going to call an alert and ship you all out to the field. And that's exactly what they did time and time again. So I think one year we wound up spending as much as 6 months out in the snow when we could have been nice and warm, just because people were acting out so badly back in our unit. So ever since then, I've been watching for this kind of behavior in moldy buildings, and I see it. People acting out in a way that is far beyond any of their normal behaviors, and get them out of it, and they revert to being fairly normal people again.
Erik, you even had stabbings in your unit, didn't you?
Yes, we did.
Now, is this an example of, you made a statement to Alicia and I in another discussion that the rage is part of the nervous system sensing dysfunction.
Yeah, I believe that, you know, if you stick your head in an oven and run out of oxygen, you'll be desperate. You'll show signs of distress, but you won't necessarily be in an angry rage about it. But something about this particular toxin creates precisely that response. And since it's some kind of inhibition of the nervous system, I believe that this distress, this rage, this acting out is a deep-seated sense of distress at just how badly your neural function is being shut off.
We have a comment from Jen, and she is saying, I'm interested in any information regarding studies involving children and anger behavioral issues. I work with children and families living in low-income housing. Oh, that's so sad. Many of whom are labeled as emotionally disturbed in school. I might cry reading this. I've long suspected that mold could be a factor for these children and families. Yes, of course. It doesn't sound like there are many physicians willing to test and make statements about causation. Jen, this is like, I mean, you just hit like all of the pain points of why we can't like help people.
Well, this goes back to the academic insanity. We ask for research into this and they tell us, well, you have no proof. All you have are anecdotal stories.
Can I please say something?
Sure.
Unfortunately, I was a very successful 4.2 GPA student. I took care of my father. He passed away from mold toxicity. I now live in low-income housing. And I have 7 of my neighbors who are all suffering. They just put them on the streets anytime, or they say use bleach to clean their home. And unfortunately, I have a little girl that's had 14 surgeries. I'm getting ready to get kicked out of my home. I just received another note on my door today. I'm trying to get a news station to listen to me. Stachybotrys was found in the top part of my home. There was 11 mycotoxins in my home that were found. I have what's called allergenic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis in my lungs. And I spend most of my nights and days outside. I'm only inside, so I have internet. You know, I can show you guys 5 families who are suffering. I can give you pictures. I can give you their weight loss. And these are people who are low income. And it's so weird. It's a blessing that I'm kind of here because I feel like I'm going to help and change, not just for my child, but for these other people. And it just so happens that I've educated myself.
Yeah, I know from our layman's point of view that this is compelling evidence, but it means nothing to the academic mind. As far as they're concerned, without a peer-reviewed study, our stories mean nothing to them.
It absolutely doesn't, because they're millionaires. And I can tell you right now, I have all medical evidence for myself. My child doesn't suffer from her only rage, anger comes from academic studies. If she doesn't do well enough. But I, unfortunately, have been suffering from the mold rage.
Well, I've talked with CDC and NIH officials as well as various researchers trying to get them to look into this, and they all complain about the complexities of trying to study this problem. They say it's just too difficult. The measurements are really beyond their technological capability. And so at this point, they say that without vast funding, they really can't get involved.
So what if we just do it without funding?
Well, if you look at Dr. Tumanen's research, which I highly suggest everyone on this call reach out to her and just say thank you, because she has literally put up her own funds to complete a lot of this research. As Erik had pointed out today at the end of her research studies, it says, that no one is giving her money for this stuff. And I think that's what's needed. It's more the citizen scientists, us, other people who have been injured that have the money that can research this stuff. I think that's where all of this is going to come out. But you know what? honestly, I mean, we found a Stachybotrys researcher, and this information is out there. It's not like this research doesn't exist, because it does. We know trichothecene mycotoxins are extremely dangerous. We know Stachybotrys is extremely dangerous. It's not a lack of study. It's a lack of, I don't know, public policy to protect people. It's lack of insurance oversight to help people when mold is found in their home from a slow leak. It's all these other factors. And when you kind of calculate it and put it all together, that, if everyone across America that has, drywall in their house, or if they're living in a city, or if they're living in a bad location, like, what are you going to do? It's kind of a crazy, crazy situation where it's like, what's the solution here? How do we not?
Can we put a bill into effect?
I don't know. We're still trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure out the best way to move forward here. I know there are people like Brandon is trying to put forth some legislation to disclose, past water damage or anything like that. I mean, maybe it's those small steps, but, I don't know. In my opinion, maybe we need an overhaul of how we build. Maybe we need to check out what we're doing in cities. A lot of it, as Erik has theorized, is a lot of it is nanoparticle pollution driving the fungus and microbes to be acting all crazy. And so I don't really know a solution to that, and that's something that maybe we all can work together to figure out and move forward, because just too many people are hurting and losing everything and just are so sick. And, it breaks our hearts. And that's why we're here today, to try to connect with all of you, to just hear your experiences and also get information from Erik. Erik is like a living and walking encyclopedia. As Keely has mentioned before, we call him Erik Gump, because he has seen this through and through and has studied it extensively for the past 35 years. This has been his life. He's not a millionaire, he hasn't made a dime off this. It's literally just based upon passion and trying to help as many people as he can and try to find the right researchers, right? I feel like we're breaking headway here, and hopefully, we can find one that's willing to put forth their time and their interests and their money to help us come up with some sort of solution. So that's where we're at.
Erik, I wanted to ask your opinion on because I know you always take issue with this question about when people talk about trying to put policies into place. What limitations do you see with the actual follow through on that?
Well, that's the problem, and I've discussed this with researchers. They say the complexities, the variables, the way this lashes out, the way it contaminates, the way it's a cumulative problem, not just strictly limited to one building where you walk away and that's the end of your problem. Your illness can be the sum total of many exposures. They say it's simply too overwhelming to pass any kind of legislation. Now, if you look at the people that had a problem in a Stachybotrys infested building and took their possessions elsewhere, it's clear to see that you can't pass legislation that will protect against contaminated possessions that are brought out unless you test each and every object, that's not feasible. You can't do it. So for the average person who's not sensitized, maybe it might be possible to have some basic protections written into law. But for a hypersensitized person, that is completely off the radar. It's not even, those things don't apply to us. That's like trying to pass a law that protects people with peanut allergy by keeping a jar of peanuts out of their house. When a few molecules can make you sick, just the mixing machine in a bakery can transfer enough peanut molecules to be a threat to somebody's life. And everybody around them, they're eating peanuts just fine. It's only the peanut reactor who's going to have this problem. And when we're hypersensitized to black mold, that is exactly the state we're in.
Erik, I'm really curious, when you often say, these kind of things can actually work against us if we do put things into law. Could you talk more about why you feel that is true?
Yeah, because once you establish a baseline for what's acceptable and what is not. If you're an outlier from that, you're excluded. It doesn't apply to you. So they could actually use that to say, well, we've established by our standards that this is perfectly safe. So if you have a problem, it must be something wrong with you, your genetics, stress, diet, but certainly not the building. When experience tells us that people who were hypersensitized in a bad building, and then from that point on, their immune system is not calmed down, they're beyond the point at which fixing the building is going to automatically apply and correct their problem.
Yeah, I had a girlfriend, Ermi, her home. She was complaining to me that she was very sick. Her and her husband are constantly raging. Actually, her husband is raging all the time. And, you know, once you're sick by mold, you always think it's mold, right? And I told her, check for mold in your home. And it actually turned out to be mold in her bathroom, really bad. And, you know, she had an ERMI test and, you know, it came back under 10 or at 10. And she spoke with the lab assistant there, and the lab assistant basically said, oh, based upon your numbers, you should be fine. You could fix your home and you'll be okay. And, you know, till this day, she's still skirting on that false sense of security that, you know, because my home tested at this number, I'm okay, but yet she's still sick and her husband is still raging on her and they're, you know, on the verge of divorce. And it's hard to tell people these things when these experts are telling sick people that these numbers are okay. And I think that is where the malfeasance begins. And it really, really irritates me. I'll be calling them myself and setting up a mock conversation to see what they tell me about my test results. And we'll see what they say. We will report back. I don't want to put them on blast or anything and air everything out live, but we'll report back on what they say and what they feel about our opinions as well. But we have Jen here, and this is a good question for you, Erik. She's saying, in our state of Ohio, we have mold assistance and programs through our local health departments, but I'm not clear about why they have the programs and money, since they say it's not possible to reliably test for and remediate mold conditions. Does anyone know what health departments are supposed to do?
Well, I think that they're trying to work their way into helping people, but they realize that they can't establish standards. So it's really sort of a hit or miss thing. I don't think that they really know precisely what they're trying to accomplish yet. They're just trying to do something, is my feeling.
Yeah, we've been, so we know that HUD is giving $2 million to the University of Oklahoma, I think, to Dr. Richard Shaughnessy to develop a new mold test. Now, I have been emailing this guy like crazy because we really want to know what the heck they're doing. And, you know, they originally said yes, but I haven't heard back. And we're on a mission. We really want to know exactly what their research plans are, because like Erik said, in a past interview that we had with Dr. David Strauss, you know, he was the one that developed a tool that was actually able to pick up maybe a little bit more than what is being used on the market today. But that tool is no longer being used. And so it's like, if this tool was developed so long ago, why didn't we just continue on with that technology, and why did we dump it? So it's really strange how these things happen. So we'll see how it plays out.
Well, when mold testing was first developed, it was based on the concept that mold is going to be in the air. It has to be in order for you to inhale it. So this could be detected by air sampling. They found out that was completely wrong, as Dr. Strauss, you know, found out with his tests. But for years, this was the standard. If you didn't find anything in the air, they would tell you you have no right to be sick. And it was only later they found that air sampling was completely inadequate for mold in general, but for Stachybotrys in particular. It was almost a guaranteed false negative. And there was never any apology. There was never any, they didn't even talk about it when they finally switched over to saying, well, to really ascertain if a place is dangerous, we need to do more. We need to do tape lifts and we need PCR testing. And there was never any effort to go back and go, wow, all those tests that we did in the past where we assured people that a building was safe, we were flat out wrong. And I asked people in mold groups about that. They go, oh no, a test is never wrong. It just, they get better. No, it was wrong because it was misleading. And that is exactly where it stands with what's going on right now with the ERMI and the HERTSMI, where they're assuring people that this is a reliable guide as to whether or not you have a right to be ill or not, when people who are reacting to contaminated possessions are clearly an exception to that rule. So that test works against us when people go, well, the test says there's nothing here, so it must be you.
I'm so curious. Do you think that's why there are no federal standards or there is no safe level? Because it literally is impossible to achieve. Do you think that they somehow understand this, or is this
Yes.
just, okay.
I asked them and they told me so.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you asked them why there is no standard, and what did they say back to you?
Well, like I already said, it's too complicated. The variables are too numerous and too uncontrollable for any meaningful standard to be established. They know this, and that's why they're allowing this confusion to go on, because it's a can of worms that they just don't know how to deal with. And I can appreciate that. Absolutely. I mean, I can't come up with any test that would guarantee somebody's safety. If you get a water leak, you don't know about it. The first sign of your problem is Stachybotrys growing in one corner, and only the people that were in that corner get sick. People at a distance, they're still okay. I mean, how do you preemptively control for something like that? I don't believe you can.
Can you talk a little bit more about how this isn't necessarily a building issue? Because I feel like a lot of people pursue the mold theory or the mold issue as it being problems with building and construction and how they're building faulty ways or whatever.
Well, years ago, I contacted a support group leader, a chronic fatigue syndrome support group leader in Sacramento, who told me an interesting story that she had learned by harsh experience not to drive down a certain road, because if she did so, she would be laid out for 4 days. I asked, well, did you manage to figure out exactly where in the road you first started feeling something was wrong? And yes, she did. It was a eucalyptus grove. And this was a bit of a shocker to me, because I found when I was trying to avoid some moldy buildings, I was driving out to a eucalyptus grove and it was knocking me flat. And with a little bit of research, I found that Stachybotrys loves eucalyptus. It's rotted cellulose. It's very similar to the paper and sheetrock, and it just grows like crazy in it. So I thought, well, that might be it. It might be Stachybotrys. And I asked, did she pursue this problem with her doctors? And she had. And they told her, well, it's undoubtedly an allergy to eucalyptus. I go, really? Well, are you allergic to all eucalyptus groves? She goes, no. Funny now that you mentioned it, just this one. So that tells me that just like me, there are other people who are sensing that they are getting highly affected from outdoor areas which are conducive to Stachybotrys growth. And they would like to follow up on this, but they try, and doctors simply have no follow through on it. And they don't see the clues that indicate that their hypothesis, dismissing it as a eucalyptus allergy, that might be incorrect.
I loved when you told us the story, Eric, when you were in the military, how they already called out the medical establishment of how they would act if something like this were to come up. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, that was the very first lecture in biological warfare training. I was kind of surprised because the instructor starts out immediately by saying the human instinct in response to biological agents is to try to intellectualize their way out of it or chemicalize. Think up some magic pill, some cure, some incredible technological device that's going to help them escape that. And they said, but you, by the time you get through with this course, you will not do that. You will not fall into the trap of looking for magic methods to get your butt out of this problem. You will observe the problem and you will take measures to avoid it and decontaminate. And you will survive while all others who get held up trying to figure out some magic way out of it will fall apart. And they said, we can apply low-level biological warfare agents to a populace as a harassment and demoralization strategy to weaken the ability to carry on a war effort because everybody's going to be sick. And if we do this at low enough levels and we mix up these immune suppressing agents, doctors won't be able to figure it out because they will blame whatever strange illness pops up first, whatever they can detect, be it a herpes virus or a common cold or a fungal infection, whatever crops up first, they will blame that and fixate on it to such an extent that they'll say, well, this is your problem, and if you're not able to control it, there must be something wrong with you. And they'll be unable to see an entire geographic area of people, the commonality of all kinds of normally harmless infections getting worse and killing people. And I was amazed. I go, surely doctors will see the patterns. They'll see that a lot of people are abnormally sick, maybe not all with the same thing, but a whole bunch of people are failing to recover from infections that would normally be something the immune system could handle. And they looked at me and they said, yes, Johnson, some doctors will figure it out, but the majority of doctors will fight them, so their efforts will come to nothing.
Wow, that's pretty intense. Thank you so much for that, Erik. And we'll take these last 20 minutes and we'll open it up for questions for all of you that have been attending. Feel free to send over a message and we'll go ahead and let you take the stage. Really, guys? No questions? Come on.
Hey, I can talk a little bit if you'd like me to. Here, let me let my video come through a little bit too. It's kind of dark out here, but my question is, when you served, Erik, in the United States military, did they inform you that 90% of biological chemical warfare study was done on Stachybotrys stratum?
No, absolutely not. In fact, my commander was so worried about the mold infestation that we had in our unit that he called the biological warfare division to come investigate. See, at the time, we were under attack by a local terrorist gang, the Red Army faction, otherwise known as the Baader-Meinhof gang. And they were blowing up Jeeps and shooting people at random, attacked the officers' club. They had actually done an armed takeover of an outpost. So this was a very aggressive terrorist gang. And we were concerned that they had perhaps gotten some kind of biological weapon and deployed it against us. And that accounted for the high rate of sickness in our unit. So he actually called the division to come out and do an investigation. And they looked all over the place and they attached no importance to the mold. They just said, clean it up. But they didn't say that it was especially harmful or that it would have any kind of permanent damaging effects. And I asked my commanding officer if we could use our M17A1 gas masks while we were cleaning up this mold. I go, this is really scary stuff. It's having an effect on us and I'm concerned for our health. So I applied for permission to use full protection going in during our cleanup. And he thought that was a good idea. So he went down to battalion headquarters and they said, no, those filters, those gas masks are reserved for war and we're not going to waste them on a mere allergen of mold. So no permission denied. So to my way of
My
thinking,
next,
they would not have lied to us. I mean, these were our guys, and yet they showed no awareness whatsoever of toxic black mold as a potential threat.
my next question would be, since COVID has happened in February of 2020, most people have been confined either to homes or, how would I say this? Well, to our homes, 65% of our homes are water damaged. But we've been quarantined or been inside mostly because people have been made to believe that we should stay inside. Do you believe that fungal infections have anything to do with COVID?
Well, I believe the immunosuppressive properties of these toxic molds can't help but have a exacerbating effect on COVID and bring out fungal infections. And I asked researchers to watch for this. When this pandemic started, I asked them to, in the course of their research, factor in potential mold contamination to see if this could be exacerbating COVID infections leading to long COVID. And of course, they completely refused to do so.
Do you think we can be the change?
Pardon?
Do you think that we can be the change?
Can we affect change? I
Do
don't
you
know.
think that? I believe we can.
I guess we'll see, we'll see as things go, and we'll definitely work hard to make those changes. I wanted to move on to some other questions here. I have something from Sandra here. Thank you for joining us, Sandra. Can mold rage catch you off guard with a brief exposure and set it off? And Keely said, yes, you can use that feeling as an alarm to tell you it's near. Another question from Sherry. Thank you for joining us. My question is, what kind of safe housing or building practice is our best choice moving forward? I'm living in a casita camper and I need to begin thinking about permanent housing again. I'm considering a tiny home, but wondering what kind of building practices should be used if I commission a custom build. Are there other alternative housing options I should be considering? She's in Southern California. Eric, do you have any thoughts, or Keely?
Well, I wanted to make sure that I was perfectly safe. So when I built my mobile environmental control unit, I did it out of steel and aluminum and styrofoam. And the only wood in it is the floor. So this was intended to be perfectly reliable. So I'd have a tabula rasa, a clean slate for my experiments of driving into moldy areas, spending time, seeing how mold would either affect me or not, and being able to drive back out and find out how long contamination lasts once I know that I'm clear of a contaminated area. So I consider steel construction to be extremely reliable, but considering our sewer systems and your neighbor's house or not, well, you have to take that into account as well. So there's a lot of variables when trying to select your long-term option for controlling this, because even if you keep your tiny house perfect, you still have to account for the contamination in your location.
Location, location, location. If you're in a good location. What did you tell us, Eric? You said if you're in a good location, you can make a bad home good, or remediate a home and make it good. But if you're in a bad location, you can forget about your home being good. Something of that nature.
Yeah, if the ambient air outside is a problem for you, then you could move a perfectly good house in. Well, that's what my mobile environmental control unit is. It's perfect. And if I drive into a place where I don't feel so good, it's the outside air, and I can tell. And that will be the same problem that people are dealing with as they move deeper into hypersensitivity where they can do everything possible to fix up their own house. But if the area's not good, it's just not going to work for them.
Yeah, and areas are variable from day to day, right? Or even from moment to moment, not even day to day, literally a moment to moment basis.
Yeah, and the other thing is this change in the weather problem. Because if you have a perfectly safe environment and you monitor possessions that you bring in, and you're a little worried about them, you know they're contaminated, but they're not too bad. It's like, oh, I can deal with it. So I'll put it over in the corner and I'll stay away from it, but I know it's contaminated. You can observe as the weather changes, as the storm rolls in, that that thing will start affecting you. It will throw out a range. And the closer, if you get used to, in good weather, having a certain range at which you are safely away from it, you can test when a weather front comes in, how much larger that range extends. And it's really astonishing. So there again, it can really fool you when contaminated objects start to act up in weather change, come out, make you feel sick, and then the weather event is over, and then it dies back down again, and it seems like everything's reverted to normal. And you really have to be on the watch out for this variability in order to detect it. And that's one of the giveaways. If a potential contaminated object fluctuates in its power during times of weather change, then you know that it's going to be affecting you. And it's probably best to consider whether you want it in your environment.
I think we're going to make a documentary of you, Erik, in your life, because you just know too much. It's amazing. We got to find the right person. All right, Sherry, thank you for joining us. Your question is, Barbara. Thank you for joining us, Barbara. She says, can mold rage also present as sadness, depression, rather than rage or anger? Absolutely. It could present, right? It could present even as psychosis. I mean, anything, right, Erik?
Yeah, when I first started doing my proximity experiments, when I wanted to find out exactly how the Stachybotrys was affecting me, I took a postage stamp size sample out to the desert. And I waited until I got as good as I could feel, kept this at a distance, put out on a sheet of plastic at some distance from my camp. And then I would go move closer to it to try to tell what is the first symptom, the first thing that felt off that I could detect. And that was a feeling of psychological distress. I was sad, I was depressed, I felt something was wrong. I felt a sense of doom and gloom. And I'm going, that's it. That's what seasonal affective disorder is. That's what's been affecting me in the winter. It's not the darkness. It's not the lack of sunlight. It's the mold is acting up. And once I got set on that and I found myself a mold-free location, I can breeze through the winters with no seasonal affective disorder, no sadness, no depression at all.
Thank you for that, Erik. We have a question from Elizabeth. Hey, Elizabeth, how are you? Your hair is always super fabulous. You always look so cute. So she said, does Erik think Hitler's craziness could at least partially be attributed to mold? Was the bunker they cleaned the one Hitler died in? Ooh.
No, Hitler had a lot of bunkers. He had them all over Germany and everywhere else. And this was just one of them. It was built to be his forward headquarters for the invasion of Great Britain. It was his command and control center. Had a big communications complex deep underground with buried, hidden, secret bunkers and an underground railroad. It's really cool. It's still there. Someday they may open this up as some kind of tourist attraction because it's so neat. But whether or not Hitler was affected by mold, I've looked, and yeah, it's possible. He was a survivor of mustard gas during the First World War. So he was neurologically affected, and he eventually wound up with Parkinson's disease. So it seems that he was primed for this type of exposure, and I see no reason at all that all the moldy, dark places that he went in, spent time in, could have contributed to his craziness. But if you've heard the story of Mad King Ludwig, who built all the beautiful castles in Bavaria, and he was crazy. I mean, he bankrupted the country building these incredible castles. And they thought that, well, he was eventually murdered. He was drowned before he bankrupted the country. They actually imprisoned him. And he left orders that upon his death, all these castles, Neuschwanstein, and they were all to be blown up. How crazy is that? So it's a good thing they got rid of him because they saved the castles. But why was he so nuts? Well, I went to one of his castles, the Linderhof, and it was moldy as hell. That's the one with the famous grotto for Wagner's operas. They had this beautiful grotto cave built where they're going to recreate Wagner's operas. Of course, the acoustics were so bad that they never could use it. It was terrible. But it's a tourist attraction and a really cool place. But I go there and I'm getting slammed by the mold. And I'm going, wow, I wonder if this is what made Mad King Ludwig act like a lunatic. We'll probably never know.
Just speculation at this point. All right, we have another question from Elizabeth. She says, is mold rage an umbrella term for a reaction to stachy exposure and exposure to the effect, or specifically just stachy exposure? I sometimes get rage when exposed to the effect, also called MT or HT.
Well, I believe that this toxic mold exposure primes you for multiple chemical sensitivity, so then you can secondarily be exposed to all kinds of chemicals and also go into a rage. And I think part of the detoxification process, as these toxins are leaving the body, they go out through the lungs. You exhale them. And we can tell this by standing in front of people and sensing the toxins that they're giving off in their breath. And I believe that as detox is occurring, this opens up a window of vulnerability. So a lot of things will probably drive you into a rage. So I don't think it's specific to Stachybotrys, not after the illness has occurred.
So, but Stachy's the precursor, basically.
Well, people really get upset that I obsess about Stachybotrys. Well, there's a reason for that. It has some really interesting and unusual characteristics. It has the toxic properties to account for this problem. And by focusing on it, we have some chance of getting researchers to look into it. Whereas if I start to say, well, I got sick from anything and everything, from diesel fumes, from perfume, from Glade air freshener, they're going to go, no, afraid not. Those, Glade air freshener doesn't make everybody sick, so we're not going to look into that. But Stachybotrys has the scare value necessary to get a doctor to sit up and take notice. So we ought to focus on that. And hopefully by getting them to look into one thing, they'll start broadening their horizons to other secondary effects.
And the final question here was from Keely, and you basically answered it, Eric. Eric, is it possible to have a mold rage reaction from the breath of a person who is in a contaminated area? Eric Gum.
Yep. Big time, absolutely. In fact, I think we need to educate people to watch for that so that we can accumulate more anecdotal stories and try to convince our good researchers to go, maybe there's something to this.
Yeah, I mean, you can even react to your own breath, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember one time, I felt really contaminated, and I was thinking about Eric's rebreathe effect. And I was literally like in the room, like breathing in and breathing out and breathing in and breathing out, like just turning my head like a crazy person. And as I'm doing this, I'm like, I am a fucking crazy person. I am a crazy because I am retoxifying myself by breathing in my own detoxification or my own contamination, right? And this was literally me when I got out of molds, when I was sleeping. I would sleep and you're literally rebreathing in your own air, right? And so I would wake up with the heart pounding and all that stuff. And I spent so many months like that, not really understanding what the heck this rebreathe effect is. Eric will literally tell us these things And it really takes a while for you to soak it in and really understand what he's talking about and to really apply it to your life. Because I can't tell you how many times in our extensive three-way convo with Keely that, you know, he tells us these concepts and I'm like, what? And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to practice it. How does this work? What should I do? You know, and so we'll go ahead and we'll close this, but there is one more question by Renee, and I do want to honor your last question here. She's asking, can other mycotoxins cause mold rage? And as Erik had stated, yes. Other things can cause the mold rage once the illness has set in. And so hopefully we answered all your questions today, guys, and we're really excited that you joined us. It was a pretty good turnout. I'm super excited. And, you know, we'll have a lot more of these lives. Again, we're increasing our lives to 3 times a week. So Erik is taking Mondays, Keely's is Wednesdays. I'll be doing Fridays. Unfortunately, we cannot get out to Texas on Friday because the weather is so bad. I mean, I can't drive from Arizona. Keely can't drive. We can't fly. So many things are getting canceled. So we feel really bad that we can't be there, but we'll be there in spirit. And we definitely always support Shemaine. She's been so wonderful so far. And I can't wait to see her documentary. It looks really cool. Actually, we were watching the trailer the other day. So if you haven't seen the trailer, check that out. And again, we launched our education group. So that way we can get down the nitty gritty and give you the details so you guys can apply this to your life. Mold is extremely crazy, especially when you become hypersensitive. It's hard to navigate. It's literally a day-to-day strategy on how to not get hit and how to decontaminate. You know, I was talking with Keely and Erik and we're like, we just need to write a survival guide like book. You know, there's so many U.S. military like survival guides on how to live in like the middle of nowhere or after a nuclear meltdown. We need to do like a mycotoxin survival guide book or a series or class. So we do have a lot of cool stuff coming up in the future. We will be putting out Erik's Effect book soon as well. So if you are a group member, you will get that for free. If not, that will be available on Amazon Kindle. And we're also contemplating printing out physical copies. So again, check us out on exposingmold.com under the education tab to sign up. Or if you just have any questions, send us a message and we'll see how we can help you out. Okay? All right, we'll see you guys later. Bye.